Are you ready to revolutionize your relationship with money? Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Pearson Ravitz' story begins with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a passionate OB-GYN at the height of her career. But then, a shoulder injury struck during a precipitous delivery. Her dreams were shattered, leaving her unable to practice medicine. Determined to make a difference, Stephanie became an advocate for her peers, guiding them through the complex disability process. Alongside insurance expert Scott Ravitz, Stephanie founded Pearson Ravitz, a company determined to approach insurance differently. Together, they set their mission to educate and empower physicians to protect their most valuable asset, their income, and the most important people in their life, their family. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand the unique concerns of physicians. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness or injury could leave you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But with a little planning and guidance, you can prepare for every possibility. Visit PearsonRavitz.com to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor. Hello, Frugal friends. Welcome back to another episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician, the podcast that helps physicians build wealth with a frugal mindset to create a life they absolutely love. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath. And today we have a fantastic guest returning to our show, Dr. Cory Fawcett. Dr. Cory Fawcett is back to share his incredible journey of cycling across America. Dr. Fawcett spent 23 years as a private practice general surgeon in Southern Oregon. He retired from medicine in 2017 thanks to his successful real estate investments, and now teaches doctors how to achieve financial independence at financialsuccessmd.com. Recently, he and his family cycled across America, covering an impressive distance from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida. Dr. Fawcett is an avid cyclist and has won several awards in competitive cycling. Connect with him on social media at Financial Success MD. Welcome, Dr. Fawcett. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back. It's always nice to sit down and talk with you.
It's always nice to sit down and talk with you. I was just saying to you before we started recording that you're like my guru for everything. I feel like you think about strategy so well and you have so much stuff figured out. And I'm constantly in amazement at all the stuff you do.
Well, it's nice to know I'm a guru to somebody. For all this work, somebody's listening, maybe.
I think it's more than just me. I remember when we were at FinCon, people were coming up and like, oh my God, you're Dr. Fawcett and all your books. There's so many people that had read your books that were not doctors.
Yeah, I hear back from people who aren't physicians that read it too. And the message is the same. It's just that I use examples in the book that doctors would and physicians would understand well.
Right.
And they couldn't say, well, but that wouldn't pertain to me. I gave examples that they couldn't back away from. And that's really the only difference between someone who's not a doctor reading it is just that the examples won't be as relatable as they are to physicians.
I think personal finance in general, it applies to everyone because we're using the same set of rules, the same set of investing rules, the same set of tax rules.
Same math.
Yeah, the same math. Exactly. What you've done, you have set as such an example. Not only do you teach, but you're living the values, right? You invested in real estate, you invested in the stock market, and you have done so well. You were able to retire early, and now you're living the life, right? And I really wanted to have you on to talk about what life is like once you have achieved your goals. And I was following your journey with your bike ride across the country with your son. How long did it take you to cycle across America?
49 days. But that didn't count the 2 days to drive to our starting point and the 2 weeks to get home from our ending point. It was about 9 weeks in total of our life that went into it. But 49 days, we rode for 42 days and had 7 rest days in that. It's not really conducive to your life to do strenuous things every day continuously without rest. We had planned each week to take 1 day off and just rest. And I think very good chance you get hurt if you don't do that. or you just
Absolutely.
run yourself into the ground. That's what burnout's all about. People who don't take a rest and they don't get a break, they just keep going and they go until they burn out. It's
Right.
hard to recover.
Yeah, I mean, the financial independence journey, I feel like also the people that are racing towards fire can sometimes find themselves in the position of burning out quicker because they're just trying to amass the savings and the investing. How did you balance that in your career? Can you tell us a little bit about your career?
Well, you mentioned something a little bit earlier that I would disagree with. And you said, I've retired and now I'm living the life. But the truth was, I lived the life all the way through all the working years. And I think that's a real key. I was traveling all through my career. I took 12 weeks of vacation a year and I planned it that way. And that cost me a lot of income because I wasn't working. And, I was in private practice. So if I wasn't working, I was going negative every
Hmm.
week. So my wife and I, we got married when I was in my first year of residency. We started out poor, basically. She earned about the same amount of money as I earned as a new intern, and we decided to live on half of our income. And we kept that plan up through our whole life. And so in the beginning, one paycheck went to all of our expenses, the other paycheck went to savings for the future. And when we ended residency and moved and set up our new job, she just never got another job after that. My income went up enough that living off of half of our income was an increase. We increased our lifestyle and continued to just live on half. And so that was really the secret to why I was able to retire earlier is we were saving close to 50% of our income. But the entire time through there, I'm taking lots of vacation. We're traveling a lot. We're living the life. I think it's a big mistake for anybody to say, I'm going to hustle through fire and then I'll start my life because you're wasting all those years. Why would you work extra hard so that you can quit a job sooner that you don't like? Make it a job you like. Change things about it so that it gets to where you like it and you can do it for a long time, but you'll enjoy your life all along the way. And you won't, my grandfather died before he could retire. He never got a retirement. That's going to happen to some of us. So live your life all along the way. I was talking with my older son, the one who didn't get to go on the trip. We were talking about that right now I've cut back on my traveling. I'm not traveling as much now because I have grandkids and it's a new phase of my life and I'm staying home and we babysit the grandkids 2 days a week during the school year. It's great to spend that time with the grandkids and some strangers not raising your grandkids. But he made the comment that, yeah, he had a time when he quit traveling too. Our kids rebelled against all the traveling that we were doing. And they've at one point literally said, I don't want to go anymore. I want to stay home and play with my friends. Because they would get done with their break and we would go on a trip, right? And their friends stayed home and played all this stuff. And they would come home and their friends would tell them all this great stuff they did, but our kids couldn't quite relate to it because they weren't doing any of that. Our kids would tell them what we did and they couldn't relate to that. And so they just wanted to stay home and play with their friends.
My kids have said the same thing to me. Aiden goes, why do we travel so desperately, Mommy?
Yeah. And the kids don't want to do that. They want to play with you. So you could take your vacation time and just stay home and play with the kids and they would love it. We learned a lesson at that point, and we learned it early on before we made some changes that your kids don't want the same thing from a vacation that you do. And I think that's a big problem. We did one trip where we went to a bunch of national parks and our kids had no desire to see scenic national parks.
Right.
They play on their Game Boys at the time they had Game Boys. We'd drive the motorhome up and, okay, here's the paint pots in Yellowstone. And they'd look out the window. Yeah, those are paint pots. And that's about all they got out of it, and we realized that's the wrong vacation. The next vacation we took with our motorhome was a water park tour. And we went from water park to water park to water park. And they loved that one. Every summer we took a 3-week motorhome trip with the kids. And they loved those, except the one when we went to all the national parks. So we learned to modify that. And now that I'm older and now the kids are out of college and they do want to travel with us, I learned the secret is you let them pick the destination and all the activities and you just pay for it. And they want you to go on a trip with them. So everybody wins.
Yeah, and you get to spend time with them. So you win in the end too. So what inspired you then to cycle across America? How did that happen?
I was a lecturer at a conference and met somebody there who was also lecturing and had written a book. The book was all about doing things with your kids. And it recommended that you ask them, hey, what would you like to do together, you and me? And so I came home from this thing and read that book on the plane coming home. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And I went and I asked my son, so I'd like to do something that the two of us can do together. What would you like to do? And he says, well, how about we ride our bikes across America?
Is that something he's been thinking about for a long time? That's a random thought.
Well, our family are cyclists. We ride a lot. I've ridden in Cycle Oregon multiple times, and the older son rode in that with me. And that's 100 miles roughly a day, bike riding around Oregon for a week. We used to race bicycles, and each of us have won Oregon's best all-around racer in our age group in the past. And so we're a cycling family. The two kids both cycled on University of Oregon cycling team. So cycling we do. And we've talked about this before, and that's a big adventure. And it just came out. It came out in a good time for him. He was changing jobs. So there was a gap that would be between the two jobs. And he said, I get rid of this job. I don't have to apply for the other one immediately. Let's do this adventure. And then when we get back, I'll apply for the other one. And I had a gap, and my gap matched his gap, and the other son's, it didn't match him. And we knew that my brother-in-law had been thinking about this adventure. It's hard to put it all together. So we contacted him, and after a little contemplation, he said yes. So we were off. It was just because I read this book that said, do things with your kids. And I asked my son, what do you want to do? And here we are. We're planning a trip. And when we did this, we had something like 4 weeks to get ready for it.
Wow. So what did you do to plan for such a long trip? And it would seem like you wouldn't be able to carry much.
Well, there's a couple of ways to do this. First thing we had to do was clear our schedule. I had a lot of things on my schedule during that 2-month block we were going to be gone. All of us had to clear our schedules, and then we had to decide how we were going to ride. Are we going to be self-contained, so we carry everything we need on our bike? And some people do it that way, and they camp. And so you're carrying a little tent and a sleeping bag, and you go along, and wherever you're at, you can just pull over and sleep for the night. We didn't like that idea. I kind of like sleeping in beds now. I'm getting old. I'm over 60. To do this adventure over 60, you like to sleep in a bed at night. So we wanted to do hotels. So that meant we didn't want to be carrying all of our gear. So we wanted a sag wagon. That's the car that carries all your equipment and your clothes and your luggage. And my wife volunteered to be our sag wagon driver. And so now we had all of our equipment in the car. So then we had to pick a route. If you're going to ride that far on a bike, you want a pre-planned route that someone's done before, that they know a bicycle can do this in this area.
Yeah.
Some roads are not accessible to bicycles or are dangerous for bicycles. And so adventure cycling has multiple routes across the country. There's a northern route across the edge of Canada, one in the middle of the country, and one at the southern edge. And we kind of looked at those three, and the two top ones we're going to leave in April. And that's going to cross the northern Rocky Mountains during snow season still. So we thought that was a bad idea. We don't want to get caught in a snowstorm. So we took the southern route, and we bought the maps from them. And so we got maps, and we got our equipment. We got everything planned. And then it was just a matter of picking the day to start and taking off. You don't plan out every day's ride. We said we wanted to average about 65 miles a day. You're not going to ride 65 miles every day. It's going to be variable because you kind of find good places to stop. I didn't anticipate that a lot of times when we wanted to stop, we were out in the middle of nowhere.
A lot of that's just desert from San Diego to Texas.
Yeah. And Texas, West Texas is terrible. It's just desert, and it was headwind every day. But there would be places that we're ready to stop for the day, and the car would need to drive us over 50 miles to get to the nearest hotel. Wow. If we had been tenting it, we would have just stopped, pulled over, set up our tent, spent the night. But it's 50 miles to the next hotel. Then one day we had to drive forward 50 miles to that hotel. And the next day we had to drive back the 50 miles to start our bike ride again from where we left off. So we realized we're going to ride right back to that hotel again. So we got that hotel for 2 nights. And we didn't have to unpack that night. We just got up, put the cars in, and we rode past the hotel, then got back. And so we stayed 2 nights in that hotel.
That's commitment, that you didn't cheat and just keep going.
We did that a couple of times. There were a couple of times where we were riding in an area that was really just nasty. We started up the next day a few miles forward of that and got out of the mess. There was construction places, there were roads that were terrible. And there was a couple of times where we did not return to the spot that we stopped. There was at least twice where we stopped right at the beginning of a construction zone. And then the next day we started up at the end of the construction zone.
It's more about the experience than the concept of biking all across the country.
Yeah, we didn't.
You don't want to get hurt.
It wasn't important that we biked every single mile across there. If there were a few miles, in fact, there was a chunk of 200 miles that we cut out. When we got to East Texas, they were having a flood. It had multiple big storms right in a row, and it was declared a disaster area. The governor had brought in the National Guard. The roads are flooded.
Wow.
It was terrible, and we had a decision to make. Do we risk riding through a flood zone in a disaster area? You're not supposed to ride into a disaster area. You're supposed to leave the disaster area, let them do their thing, and then the disaster goes away and you come back. Do we ride into that? So we made the choice to ride like 450 miles in the car to get around. You had to go north to get around the flooded area to the other side of the flood zone, begin riding. And we were following another rider who was doing the same ride as us. Not exactly the same roads, but very close. We were watching his blog every day. He decided to go ahead and ride through it. He literally hit a flooded area and he decided he would go ahead and ride through it. And he's riding through this trail that's got about a foot of water on it. And you have no idea what your tires are on or what you might hit, or if there's an alligator waiting there, and he rode for quite a ways before he decided this is stupid. He turned around, rode back, and then found another way. When trouble comes, that doesn't mean quit. It means pivot.
Yeah, just take a detour and then get back at it. I like that. Now, did you ride when it was raining?
We did. Weather didn't stop us. We got wet. One day, we knew it was going to rain today, and we got started. And when the rain, our phones all buzzed, and we stopped to get this emergency weather warning. Hurricane winds, take cover, do not be outside in this. And at the moment we get this, we're out in the middle of a trail or on a bike path area. We're nowhere near the car can pick us up. We're out in the wilderness, and it's not raining. And thought, well, okay, and we'll just ride on and we'll get to the road and we'll see what happens. And as we started going, then the monsoon just hit us.
Oh my God.
It rained so hard, it felt like we had taken our bicycle into the shower with us to clean it off. I mean, it was just pouring. We pulled under this tree, and I watched the ground beneath us turn from a dry ground to a river.
Wow.
The water became a river in front of us. It was raining so hard, and thunder and lightning. And we waited and waited and waited. And then we were just soaked. And now we're getting cold because the temperature, when the storm hit like that, the temperature just immediately dropped 10 degrees. I'd never seen that happen before. Just poof. And now it was okay the way it was. But now it dropped into the low 60s, and we're wet and it's windy and we're getting very cold. And we need to ride to generate some heat. And so we started riding, and then we finally got to the roads, and we kept riding to where we were going to be meeting with our car again. And the sides of the roads were flooded. We couldn't see if we were going to hit an obstacle, a big rock or an old piece of tire on the road. That was kind of dangerous. We didn't like that. And then the car finally caught up with us, and we got in the car. And we were now debating, do we keep riding? We're not riding in this. And we decided, well, it tends to pass. They don't keep like this. And so we sat in the car with the heater on, warming up for about a half hour. And the main bulk of that storm passed. It was a light rain. And we decided we'll go ahead and ride. And we put on our warm clothing and took off again.
Oh my God. That sounds like Chafe City. How did you cycle with wet clothes?
Well, usually you're cycling with wet clothes, but they're wet with sweat.
Right.
And you're not usually this thoroughly wet. Usually your clothes are damp, but you don't usually lift your arm up and it's running off of you. You're not dripping wet usually, but we were very wet. And mostly I worry about my feet being wet all day on a day like that. we kept riding, and we'd probably only ridden 10 miles that day so far when this happened. And we rode maybe 2 or 3 miles in the storm till we caught up with the car and then took a break and got out of the rain.
Yeah, it's a long time in the rain on a cycle.
Forget the burdens of tenants and toilets. Equity Multiple simplifies your investment journey, letting you invest passively in vetted, professionally managed commercial real estate. Only 5% of reviewed investments reach Equity Multiple's platform, with our asset management working on each from funding through exit to maximize your returns. Whether you're on the couch in your exec chair or the backseat of a ride share, Equity Multiple brings cash-flowing real estate investments straight to your fingertips. All investments involve risk. Visit equitymultiple.com to learn more.
What was the biggest physical hurdle for you in this journey?
Probably that you mentioned it, chafing. Ended up getting some special medical tape to put on my rear end where the sore spots were to keep the rubbing from happening. It doesn't usually bother me at all when I'm riding 30 or 40 miles every other day, but 65 miles every day takes a toll. As far as our muscles and such, we were pretty good. We already were all riding, but we weren't riding with those mileage numbers. And we didn't really give us enough time to get ready for those numbers. We just ramped up our riding a little bit before we left and then took off. We figured we'd just get in shape as we went. And that did happen. In fact, when I got home, I couldn't believe how much more powerful my legs were on a bike ride than before.
That's awesome. Did you lose any weight?
I did not.
You look like you've lost weight.
Well, I lost a little bit, but not so much as you would talk about. I think more my body repositioned the weight. I gained more muscle, lost a little fat, but I ate well on this. And so that's a misnomer that you can ride that much and that means you can eat anything you want. That's not true. If you don't watch what you eat, you still can gain weight while exercising that much. So I ate well. I probably at most was down maybe 3 pounds or so. I know there was some shape change in my body during those weeks.
Well, that's good. I mean, that sounds like a positive thing for sure. What was the biggest mental hurdle? Did you face any mental hurdles in such a long journey?
Yeah. On some of those days, you're sore, you're tired, and yet you haven't ridden far enough. And we just have to keep going. So there was a few days like that you just got to say, I'm going to keep going. Now, I had in my ear a book. I was listening to audiobooks as we traveled. I was always listening to a story that helped me mentally not get bored hour after hour, especially when we were in the desert, hour after hour of nothing to look at and in the heat, and you're tired and you're sore and you're hungry, just mentally to keep going when those happen. But you know what? I got through residency. So after that, I can do anything.
That's right. Residency is very much like Green Beret training. It's just how much can you take, especially surgical residency.
Yeah, I was working 110-hour weeks. I started residency before they had time restrictions. And you learn how to keep going, even when you're at the end of your rope. And that's helped me later in life when I've done something like this, that you really need to keep going. I remember a bike race that was like that. It was so horrible that day. It was raining. It was a muddy race. I was caked in mud. I was cold. I was tired. I was left in the dust, but there was no dust. I was left in the mud, and I was way back. I mean, my placing isn't even going to matter. And I came around, there was a couple of laps, and I came around to the starting point again. I had 1 lap to go, and I thought about quitting. And when that happened, I remember saying to myself, I don't want my son to see me quit, because I don't want him to think quitting when it's tough is the right answer. And so I rode that other lap and was just miserable, but I finished the race. In fact, I finished the race so far behind that day that there was nobody at the finish line to record that I crossed the finish line. Find somebody, and they had me listed as did not finish. That's how slow I was that day. And I argued with them, and I made them change it, and they needed some sort of proof. And eventually I was saying, like, what good's it going to do? I mean, I'm 112th. Why do you care if you list me as 112th or didn't finish? I don't get any points for it. I get it, but I want proof that I did this thing, And they finally gave me the recognition that I did finish the race. But residency teaches you that you can keep going, even
Right.
when it gets really tough. You're right, that Green Beret training or a Navy SEAL training, it's designed to weed out the people that won't keep going when it
Right.
gets tough. That's not the guys you're looking for. Maybe that's the reason that surgery residency was so difficult back then and it's probably just as difficult today, just they don't work you as many hours, was to weed out those that couldn't keep that pace up, because that will happen. There will be times. Some days, when I was in practice, most of it was pretty tolerable, but some days a bus would crash and I'm working all through the night because there's a lot of people injured and you can't just stop because you're tired. There's 4 more injured people that need me to help them. And I got to just keep going. And once you learn that lesson, you apply it to every place else in your life. On those tough days when it's just pouring down rain, you just say, okay, let's ride. Let's ride. We can ride wet. And you ride wet.
I mean, there's so much mental fortitude involved, and clearly you had a lot of it. What did you do when you got to the end? Did you celebrate?
Not really. Mostly we were just rested. We went out to eat, but we did that every night. So that didn't seem like really a celebration. We just kind of took a lazy day. And then we did go to Universal Studios in Orlando for a day.
Mhm.
It was really hot that day. My wife didn't want to be out in the heat. And so she stayed home. So the 3 guys who did the bike ride, we all went to Universal Studios.
Oh,
And then we
that's fun.
put my son on the airplane. He flew home to spend a week with his girlfriend. And then we drove home. And on the way, then in about 10 days later, we picked him up because he was en route. So we had a nice leisurely trip home. When we were done with the ride, I wrote an article about the financial lessons I learned on this trip. And it wasn't about how you spend your money. It was about the other things about it. And one of the big ones is to make time for adventure in your life. It is a big mistake to chase fire at the expense of everything else so that you can retire early. I noticed that one of the big founders of FIRE, and I won't name him, is divorced. I wonder how much living too frugally and chasing fire contributed to that situation. But you need to make time for adventure. Just because it takes a lot of time to do something doesn't mean you can't do it. We get into this rut that our job has to follow exactly what we've been doing. Avoid that, oh, that's the way we've always done it. That's a terrible thing to ever say. That's the way we've always done it. That is never the right answer. For example, during my time with bicycles, for instance, one of my kids says he wanted to race bicycles. He was a teenager. And I says, okay, well, if I got to go to the races anyway, I'm going to be there. I might as well race too, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't drive. I got to take him there. And so I started racing bicycles. And then I decided I was going to go for the men's all-around win. I'm a full-time surgeon. You have to race a lot of races to do this. And that year I raced, I think it was 56 races across the state, all over the state. I could race Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday some weekends. You can set a goal like that takes a lot of time and just make the time and do it. You can work that into your life. I wanted to be in a play. It required that I be there every night to rehearse. I couldn't take a call night and maybe not be there. They wouldn't allow that. But I wanted to be in this play. I wanted that adventure. And so I made an arrangement with one of the other guys that he would take all of my call during the play. And then after the play was over, I would take all of his call for the same corresponding amount of time. So we just made a trade and I could do the adventure.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes. Don't throw adventure out of your life just because it takes a chunk of time, because you can find that. The other big thing that I would say I saw loud and clear is don't underestimate your spouse and the importance they are in your life. I get so tired of seeing things online like, does anybody know a shark lawyer? I'm getting divorced and I don't want her to get anything. She doesn't deserve any of it. I earned all the money. She didn't work. And that's not true. She worked a lot. We couldn't have done this adventure without her help of getting the car in place, getting our gear there. When we get a flat tire, she's bringing us a good tire pump so we didn't have to use a little bitty thing on our bikes that are emergencies, but we can get the real pump. She made it happen, but she was not the one in the limelight. It was the three riders. Yeah. Nobody notices the person driving the support car, but we couldn't have done it without her. After the football game, nobody's interviewing the lineman. They interview the quarterback. But if the lineman didn't keep those defenders away from the quarterback, he could not have completed those passes. Yet they get no credit. And we do that with a non-working spouse. And that's not fair. You shouldn't be trying to divide up the expenses based on who earns what.
Absolutely.
You're in this together. You pool the money, you pool the expenses, and the two of you live life together. Each contributes what they can contribute. And just don't underestimate the importance of that spouse that doesn't work. Those were two really big takeaways that I think I noticed during the ride. There's a lot of more. You could read the article I wrote after the ride, kind of summarized about 8 points that were there. But those are two big takeaways. You can't just eat what you want just because you're exercising a lot. And the same thing holds with your money. You can't just spend what you want just because you make a lot. You still have to spend less than you earn, no matter how much you earn, because you can still gain weight riding 65 miles a day on your bike. You can't take a pass on math and eat all you want. You can't just take in all the calories. It still has to be less than what you burned. And you got to live your financial life that way too. You must spend less than you earn, or the outcome isn't very good when you don't do that.
Well, I want to transition now to a rapid fire segment. This is a fun segment. I'm just going to ask you a couple of things. Just name the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I'm on the spot now. Okay.
All right. What's your favorite cycling gear or gadget?
My watch. It keeps track of how I'm doing physically. It keeps track of the bike ride, where we went. And the cool thing I learned on this ride, my son taught me that I can plan out the map of where we're going to ride, download it onto my watch, and it will beep at me every time I'm supposed to turn. And my watch keeps me just like your GPS in your car. My watch will do that for me. And we never get lost. I just kept following. Oh, yeah, we turn in 1 mile. And we just followed this watch. This is a Garmin Fenix 7. Each one of us had a Garmin watch on. Each was a different model. Each could do that function, which was really cool. That's my favorite piece of gear.
Awesome. What was the most scenic route you cycled through?
There was two places I really liked. One was the Texas Hill Country. That's kind of in the center of Texas coming into Austin. The Texas Hill Country was really beautiful. I would love to go back there. I traded timeshare into the Texas Hill Country and just explore there. And the other one was when we got down to the coast of Mississippi and Alabama. The coastal ride along there, they had a bike path that kind of went right along the beach. And that area was just beautiful.
What was your go-to snack for long rides?
Cliff Bars. That's my favorite on the bike snack.
What was one thing you missed the most about home during the ride?
My piano. The entire time I couldn't play the piano. And so I went a couple of months without it at all. So one of the first things I did when I got home was to sit down to play the piano.
And we had the pleasure of having you play at our house after you finished your journey. You came up here to upstate and had some dinner with us, and you played a couple of songs before us, and it was wonderful. You're a very talented musician, clearly. I know you were hurt.
It was a lot of fun to play with your son.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate your time. Always appreciate your wisdom and all that you share with us. Are there any last pieces of wisdom you'd like to leave with our audience today?
To be sure to put adventure in your life. And I think that's the thing that I would take home from all of this. Don't let the fact that you have a career stop you from living a life of adventure.
I love that. I'm taking the kids, speaking of theater camp, I'm taking the kids to the city by myself, and we're going to do a whole week in New York City, and they're going to do theater camp, and I'm going to do jazz camp. And in my book, that's a big adventure.
That will be the kind of thing that your kids will remember forever. And that's probably way better than taking them on a cruise on the French Riviera.
Yes.
You know, they're going to love that way more than sometimes we think we have to take these big, fabulous, expensive, wow vacations. But just taking the kids to band camp or something can be phenomenal.
I hope so. But thank you so much for the inspiration. And please continue to share what you're doing. And we hope to have you back on this podcast soon.
I'm ready to come back whenever you want.
I love it. Well, thank you and have a great day.
Thanks.
What a fantastic episode. For our listeners who want to learn more about Dr. Fawcett's work or connect with him, you can find him at financialsuccessmd.com and on social media at financialsuccessmd. Don't forget to check out his latest blogs that chronicle this epic bike ride. Links can be found in the episode's description. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Your support helps us reach more physicians who are striving to build wealth and achieve financial freedom. And, as always, stay frugal, y'all. Catch you next time. Now, a final word from our sponsor. At Pearson Rabbits, they understand that life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness, injury, or catastrophic event could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Rabbits builds human connections before they create quotes. Visit www.pearsonrabbits.com today and embark on your journey to safeguarding your future.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.